Excellent. All right. Thank you, Ryan. And so I'll introduce myself, and then I'll let these distinguished gentlemen introduce themselves. But I'm Erik Weiss, as I mentioned. I run retail and CPG at Neustar. And Neustar, we're a and an identity, both offline and online data and identity activation, measurement and analytics provider for a lot of the largest CPGs, retailers, and many other verticals. So um, I'll say that it's for me. I told this gentleman when we spoke last week. My first job in high school, I was selling sneakers at the Athlete's Foot, and I happened to be a huge basketball fan, big NBA fan. So it was really, for me, this was just it felt like it was just like a very apropos panel to sort of moderate. So it's really a pleasure to be here and talk to these guys. Why don't I pass it, Yuron, to you, and you guys both introduce yourself.
Yeah, I appreciate it. And thanks, Erik. Love the energy Ryan brought as well. I didn't know poolside was an option, or else I probably would have at least found a pool and gotten the sunshine. My name is Yuron White, and I'm the Vice President of Global Lifestyle and Basketball for New Balance. Good to be here.
Thanks, Erik. Thanks, Ryan. Patrick Cassidy. I am the Global Director of Consumer Marketing and Athlete Activation at New Balance.
Yeah.
And I am happy to say I've been a veteran of Brand Innovators events for several years. So it's good to be back. Thank you.
Excellent. So welcome back. This is not my first rodeo as well, so it's fun to be here. So why don't you guys said obviously your titles, what you do. Do you mind going in just a little bit more depth of like what are your mandate? Like what's your responsibility at New Balance? Give the audience some context of what you're what you actually spearhead. Maybe we'll start with Patrick.
Thanks. So at New Balance, so I've been at New Balance for 8 years. I started by my original mandate coming into the brand was to build and lead a global digital department. Over the years, I've switched to this consumer marketing role, and now my teams oversee all the marketing for New Balance global running, lifestyle, basketball, global football, tennis, track, baseball, all the other sports associated with the brand, as well as the activation of the athletes in each of those lanes.
Excellent. You're on.
Man, Patrick's job is so much more detailed than that. I thought I was going to be able to take a break, go off video. He definitely undersold that.
Jump in the pool.
Yeah, no doubt. Little dip in the pool. So basically, within my role, I basically lead the strategic vision for both basketball and lifestyle, and I would also throw in a little bit of skate in there. I always kind of frame it up in the elevator pitches. I really look to transcend culture through listening to the voice of the athlete. And like as you said, Erik, your passion, from a young age with basketball and the NBA, like that was kind of me and Patrick's kind of blueprint as well. And so we want to create the experiences that we had when we were kids, and we were able to open up a box and feel like we could go out and dunk a basketball. I'm sure Patrick could, but I definitely had to settle for
not even close. You're on. That was way better than mine. Should I start over? Like that was really good.
Excellent. Well, all right. So then obviously it's a good segue to move into basketball specifically. And so why is and Yuron, maybe we'll start with you. Why is basketball so key in building a sports brand, right? And what's the halo effect of that, right? So it's obviously you guys sell to more sports than just basketball, but what makes basketball so important for the New Balance brand, but really any brand in the sports segment?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's one that I kind of go back to. Like, to me, I really look at basketball as being the heartbeat of the organization, right? And I've had 25 years in this industry. The last two, I've been working for New Balance, but I've been associated with the basketball experience for the last 25 years, whether it was at the Nike brand, the Jordan brand, and now here at New Balance. And I think, sometimes from the inside, it's a little bit hard to explain, and from the outside, it's hard to understand. But that there's an it factor there that transcends sport into culture and lifestyle. And so if you want to make it within an athletic footwear industry, I use basketball as the heartbeat and the pulse of that organization and that strategy.
Yeah, Patrick, I probably said it all, but do you have anything to add to that as well?
Sure. I mean, if we're talking about why basketball for a top global sports brand, it's because of the reach, the connection to lifestyle, the connections to culture, fashion, and everything associated with it. Like I grew up in the first long stretch of my career was in basketball, so I grew up in the industry with my previous life and role and career, but it was all built on what that connection was between basketball, that basketball specifically has for to performance and lifestyle and just broader culture in general around the world. There's nothing like it in any other category.
Yeah, definitely. And so, how is this segment different? Say marketing. Yeah, so obviously it's very competitive, clearly, right? So you said the it factor, right? So obviously that's you want to be the it brand in this sort of it segment. But maybe how is that different than say soccer or running and other segments you're in? Like, is it similar concepts, or is basketball very unique in that regard?
Yuron, I'll go first, but it's unique in a couple different ways. It's not only would I say it's not only would I say it's a challenging category. I would argue it's the most challenging category. There are brutal competitors with other brands around the world, with loads of money, loads of athletes, loads of other resources, and they're all trying for the same thing. And the prize is that kid who's buying the basketball sneakers around the world. Doesn't matter if the kid's in Chicago or if that kid's in China. So it has just a little bit more where there are other sports that have significant reach and ties to culture, like global soccer, football, but there's nothing that is like truly as dialed in as say basketball is, in terms of basketball has its own language, basketball has its own evolving style, basketball has its own evolving culture that is super unique and more dialed in probably than any other sport in the world.
Right. That makes sense. So then let's get to then New Balance. How have you been successful? I mean, you mentioned brutal competition, right? Major brands with tons of money. Some of the biggest companies in the world, biggest advertisers in the world you're up against. Mm-hmm. So how do you guys enter basketball and then be successful at
it? In a super strategic, patient, goal-oriented way. It's not always easy to stay on the track on a day-to-day basis. But when we started this, New Balance was in basketball pretty significantly in the 80s. So we have some heritage and somewhat of a foothold there in in the olden days. But when we started it again, it was an effort to be a top 3 global, help us become a recognized top 3 global sports brand. But we had to do it in a different way. The basketball landscape is essentially, for the most part, a graveyard of other brands that have all tried to enter basketball repeatedly over the years, and it all ends up going the same way for them, and they're out of basketball before they're even actually in basketball. So starting from the beginning was, how are we going to do this in a super unique, patient way that's unique and authentic to who New Balance is as a brand. So we have been preaching patience and discipline and a reliance on superior product and hopefully what people think is really good marketing as well along the way.
Yeah, it's great. Yuron, I love your perspective here as well.
I think Patrick is has a way of bringing something that is extremely complex to a very simple, like the it factor, right? Like for me, I think it's a combination of things, including the specialness and the secret sauce that New Balance is. And I would say that, like the old saying, if you want to go like fast, go alone. And if you want to go far, go together. We are committed as a basketball community, and that would include lifestyle in it, that we are going to go far and we're going to go together. We have said from the initial outcome that it wasn't going to be about just being the biggest, but we wanted to center around being the best. And so that authenticity helps drive us to creating a competitive advantage for the athlete through innovation. And so that'll be a big, topic for us, whether we're at the top of the page or the bottom of the page as it relates to questions. We want to make sure that we're doing things right and that we're creating a competitive advantage. And we're also telling stories through the lens of the athlete, right? We're not just going to be a marketing company. We're going to be an authentic marketing company. And so when you connect that innovation, that competitive advantage that we drive through technology with the storytelling and the experiences, it makes something compelling for the consumers to want to respond and react to.
Yeah. So, I mean, these are great points about, investment and patience and authenticity and just, doing it, having a long-term outlook. And that's essentially what brand building is about, right? Is that how do you build that authenticity, that relationship, that association? And yet, you guys have finance departments, they're looking at numbers, they're figuring out like, well, there's got to be KPIs you have to hit. So maybe could you guys talk a little bit about, in that long-term horizon, like what are you measuring? What are the KPIs that you're measuring along the way to see that you guys are on the right path and that gives the company the confidence to keep investing in the segment?
I would say there's a bunch of things that we look at, but we can circle in on a few here. Obviously, things like sales are super important, right? But we made it very clear from the beginning when we were building the strategy that this is not basketball specifically for New Balance is not and we actually use this term a lot. When we started this, it's not a get rich quick scheme. It's just not going to happen. If we want to build this for the long haul, and for what we wanted to do for the brand, if we wanted to really impact the brand globally, it's not about like how many pairs of basketball sneakers we're selling at the very moment right from the beginning. That was part of the recipe for failure if we want to go down that route. So we want to build that for strategically over time. What it has done though is where sales and new consumer consideration and adoption starts to branch out like, yeah, sure, we want to sell all the basketball sneakers and we've done a very good job of that so far, but the lifestyle footwear and apparel that is being sold globally, the things that show that this is working is the basketball really getting revved up at New Balance has changed relationships with retail partners for the better, for more intake, how that business and those relationships are growing around the world in super positive directions. And then like overall broad reaching is, one of the reasons, like a main reason to be a top 3 global sports brand, so we can continue to expand and get younger and faster. And so we are monitoring new consumers who are coming into the brand, who are engaging with the brand, who are getting them either in store or online, and how that is impacting directly around the world, right? So there's also stuff that we are tracking, everything like generalized from a consumer sentiment around the brand to like zeroing on really how people feel about the marketing, the product in this lane and associated lane. So there's all sorts of things that we measure, and it's really zeroing in on the things that we find most important to tell us if this is working, how it is working, what we need to do to improve.
Excellent. Yeah, Yuron, I'd love your take on this as well.
Yeah, I mean, Patrick says it all, and much better and eloquently than I stated. But like for me, when I first came into New Balance, I came in with the notion that they're not good because they're old, right? They're old because they're good, and not having the pressure of just the business really helped us to be calculated in the things that we want to do, whether it's where we want to show up, how we want to show up, how and what athletes we want to show up with. And like for me, I trust like a little bit of the art, right? With trusting your eyes, looking on court, going out to playground, starting to see the momentum. KPIs like Footwear News, Athletic Brand of the Year, or like Fast Company, voting us one of the 10 most innovative brands in 2021. Those are all KPIs that help us to understand that we're tracking in the right direction. And then I think if you just look at the revenues planned over the last 115 years, right? And you look at what our plan is for the next 5 to 10, you start to see that momentum now is starting to pay off through top line and bottom line revenue successes and margin successes as well.
Excellent. That's great. And well said as well.
Appreciate it.
So maybe let's move a little bit to tactics, right? So, can you talk a little bit about the marketing mix? Are there, there's different ways to obviously reach consumers. There's television. There's, obviously athlete relationships are very important to you, but then you put them in different mediums, and so just understand a little bit of like, are certain things working for you? Do they work in concert together? Just, how are you guys kind of making those types of decisions as you're building your brand, engaging with customers? Right.
That's a great question. So clearly, well, first of all, everything works in concert for sure,
Right.
or at least that's the goal and the hope if
Right.
we're doing it right. Clearly though, everything, and I keep going back to this, like the genesis of New Balance basketball, what were like the pillars of things that we were going to stand for, and everything. One of them was always going to be a brand, a category that the brand had not been playing in, birthed entirely through digital, right? So like, how are we going to win there? It's the great leveler of the playing field against some of the big dogs in our competitive set. And there are ways for us to reach the people that we need to reach in a highly effective way digitally. We're going to be really good doing that. But what we have found along the way is like, yeah, you can be that, but there's all these other things you have access to that if you use them in the right way, and if one of your things is you want to continuously surprise people like we do and keep it fresh and not just follow the same blueprint over and over again, there are times to pull those levers where things are super effective that may not be associated always with a basketball brand that wanted to birth everything through digital. A couple quick examples is that we've used out of home billboards in a highly effective way. We've used TV, when we first got into basketball, Kawhi Leonard was our first athlete that really came on, that we put out in the world. And he was in Toronto and we caught him at the right time as they were on a magical NBA championship run. And we turned on some pretty aggressive out of home, gigantic billboard buying tactics with him to express him and use his personality, his understated personality, essentially not only to introduce New Balance, him in conjunction with New Balance basketball to the world, but also frankly to like carve a little bit of like an aggressive line for how we were talking about his competitors and ours. Billboards in Toronto, billboards in California, billboards that have taken over LA over the last couple of years, and we use them selectively. And that has given us like, oh, okay, like this is really working. It's surprising people. It's generating the firestorms on social media when people spot these things. And what do we do with that then? What do we do with that momentum then? That has fed into pretty aggressive TV spots where we are now, that is translated not only from basketball into like our brand campaigns, where we are investing more in broadcast than we maybe ever thought we would have 5-6 years ago before this all really started.
Excellent. Yeah, Yuron, do you have things to add as well?
He hit them all on the head. I think the digital revolution and the things that we're doing there are like, we are laser focused on making sure that we can drive consumer experiences through that. Obviously our direct to consumer and making sure that we are doubling and tripling our efforts there has been a real key KPI for us. So those would be the things that I would add, which aren't very much to what Patrick said. Just in this way.
Yeah, it makes sense. And I think you're absolutely right. These things do work in concert with each other. And a lot of, I think often in measurement, people tend to over focus the lower funnel, like the digital, right? Because digital is, you could do a search, you could click, but maybe you did that because you saw something on television or you saw a billboard or, so there's these things all it certainly influence each other. And so it's exactly right to kind of, focus on what are the things that are moving the needle and the messaging and stuff like that. Sounds like you guys are doing a great job. Let's talk, you talked before a little bit about the audience, about, part of the metric you said is getting younger, right? Like, focusing on different demographics and seeing that shift as a way to determine like the longevity of the brand and the strength. can you talk to me about, and maybe, Yuron, we'll start with you this time. Talk to me about the New Balance audience, right? Like how how has it evolved?
Yeah.
And so just, who is the New Balance audience? How has it evolved? Is it different for different sports? And just give us a sense.
Yeah, it's a great question. And for me, having now spent the last 2 years here, I kind of go back to 12 years ago when I was like an account sales guy for a different part of the within the industry, but a different company. And I remember like being in the streets and walking around and seeing the New Balance that was there. And so I think first and foremost for me, it's about like how do we surprise and respect the New Balance loyalist, right? You talked a little bit as we were talking a day or two before about your affinity to the product and you wearing the product. We want to make sure that we continue to surprise and respect you, right, as a loyalist. But we also know that the consumer base is broadening based on the things that we're doing in lifestyle, the things that we're doing in basketball. And so for us, like we want to make sure that future generation, that we are igniting them and embracing them as well. And then I think equally as important, and which kind of goes through as a red thread, is the female consumer. And we want to make sure that at the start, not during or at the end, that we take care and acknowledge and serve that female consumer as well.
Yeah, makes total sense. Yeah, Patrick, do you have anything to add there?
It's a tough one to follow. I think
Yeah.
you're on. You got all that.
Okay, excellent. Well, then let me ask you then, just a little bit more on the audience segment. So that we'll start with you, Patrick. So, what are, you talked about loyalists and evolving the brand and everything, but like what are the what are these things? Obviously, gender, Euron has mentioned is important, but what are the other factors that you use to create a segment, right? Because every brand they have different audience segments. So I'll give you an example. It could be, age, gender, things like home ownership, right? It could be things like that, but so call it life stage, demographic. But then there's also things like behavioral, right? Like there is sports enthusiasts, I don't know, hipster, or whatever it might be. So I was just curious, are there certain like attributes that New Balance is looking at in creating audience segments?
Sure. I mean, obviously, like when the younger, faster, in general terms, the younger, faster, cooler consumer is the prize for everybody, and us included. In like again, in that generalized way, if like you're talking to what Euron was talking about before, like the art and the science, like for me, it begins with the art part and drills down to the science. We used to have a lot of different detailed consumers in these lanes that were maybe on broad strokes might be disparate from each other, and we've really zeroed in on when we think about who we are as a brand, right? We're a privately owned company that really truly values our independence and our independent streak, that allows us to do things like put up giant billboards around Kawhi Leonard and stuff like that, and not think twice about it. And that fearlessly independent streak is what we look for in our athletes. It's what we look for in our lifestyle collaboration partners. It's what we look for to be woven through our marketing itself. And it also is who we're looking for in that type of consumer, that kid that wants a unique alternative for maybe what his or her mom or dad wore or wear now. You know what I mean? Like we're looking for the people who are fearlessly independent, who are looking for that, who are showing signs of having this like super unique set of interests and match up with a brand that's striving to bring out the independence, the independent streak in everything we do and with our partners. So when you start to look at it that way, there's a certain aspect of young, up and coming, super creative, multifaceted, multi-talented people around the world that all share a certain level of DNA for how they operate, what they look for in the brands that they are considering, and if they don't get it with one brand and they see it with another, they're going to go with them. That's who we're trying to speak to. And once you get down into the basketball consumer or the lifestyle specific consumer, the running consumer, whatever it is, there are nuances that go along with that, but the core of it are some of these some of these values and frankly expectations that these consumers have of the brands that they are engaging with and spending money with.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I mean, you touched on it, and maybe I'll ask you, is it, you said there's nuance and there's some difference. Do you guys market differently than in each sports segment, as an example, right? Like, because is the audience, is that the common theme across New Balance? Or is it a little different, right? When you get to soccer, when you get to running, is it slightly different audience? Just talk to me about some of the nuance.
Yeah, I think like for us, as we look at it, and as I look at it with my partners who may be doing global football or running, what Patrick talked about with this fearless mindset, or this global independent, as we call them, that's really the bullseye for us. Now, as you know, consumers shop in multi-channels, and they can go into different places. Our ability to be consumer-led, whether it's through segment or whether it's through mindset, helps to really validate where and why we're going to put products to help tell the experiences that we want for the consumer.
Got it. Yeah, so it's a lot of psychographic, how people feel, what are their values, right? And connecting on that level and sort of honing in on that audience and that message. So it certainly makes a lot of sense. So let me then talk to you in building this brand and creating these values, and being in sports, which it's performance based. There has to be that balance between the technology, the actual shoe, right? For example, and then the marketing. So just can you talk to me a little bit of like the importance, like what when you're building a brand, like what's more important? Is it the product, or is it what the product represents?
Yuron, you can start that one.
Oh man, I was waiting for you to answer that. I was gonna go take the dip at the pool and just lounge for a little bit. For me, I always again, I have to like the context behind it, right? Over 25 years in the industry, the majority of that time spent in dealing with product. I always start with the athlete, the product, the innovation, and the experience, right? And I never really look at it as a like either or. I think, if we're doing it right, and as connected as me and Patrick and our teams are, it feels like very seamless, because we're starting the brief with the consumer all the way to the end in mind at retail, what that experience needs to look and feel like. And so I will say that, the more challenges that we get throughout the process, and that's cross-functional, that's our merchandising organization, our brand organization, our product teams in our organizations, the more we can put the pressure on ourselves to create the most compelling experience for the consumer, then we don't have to worry about, hey, is the brand going to tell the story that we started with, right? It has to be seamless. And so I don't look at it as the product versus the brand marketing. I look at it as the basketball team creating a cultured experience for the consumer.
I agree totally with that. It works best when they are together. I would say like, Yuron is living this and building this every day, but product is what the brand does, right? Like they're, has become a brand that stands for excellence and craftsmanship and everything that we do. For so long it was the product spoke for itself. It wasn't always like a marketing brand. It was a brand where product spoke for itself. And they like the things that the evolution in technology that has been going on specifically for New Balance, specifically footwear, not just in basketball, running, lifestyle, etc. Over the years is just remarkable. So when we got in, we pull this back to the basketball specifically. When we got into this, it was like, product has to be great, but that's what we do, right? So when engaging with the athletes who may not have had a relationship with the brand before, that was like the first thing. Is like the shoes are going to be fantastic, right? So like the thing that would I know kept me up at night is like, I know the product's gonna be great. I hope I don't screw up or we don't screw up the marketing of this, right? So like, but it's such a leg up on I would have no problem saying it's a leg up on a lot of our competitors where our product, specifically the footwear, is so far ahead of where others are, that as a core of it, the offering is amazing, and you can build from that, and we get that response. We've seen it in other sports, and we've seen it in other categories.
Right. So there is that confidence that there's sort of table stakes. The product
Sure.
has to be really good,
Yeah.
and then it's
But
about
it's going to be though. Like that's
right.
like no having that in your in the back of your mind the whole time, even before the actual first basketball shoe was made. I was like, we were all like, there's no doubt that this is going to be awesome. Like this, and we can build from there.
Right. It's going to be a great shoe, and then how do we build the story behind it and what it means? And so, so you mentioned earlier about being a challenger brand, right? You have a lot of competitors, two massive competitors. In being a challenger brand, right? What is, lack of a better word, can be a challenge. What's been your key? Like, how do you then break through as a challenger brand to develop your niche? You talked a little bit about the independence, but what's been key for New Balance to kind of, be able to stake out the position that you have?
For us, it was what's the plan? Who do we want to be in basketball? Can't be everything to everybody. We're not going to come out and knock every single competitor off of every retail shelf around the world right out of the gate. We have watched, like this is a very deliberate process that we are several years into now, where we took some really good notes and really good learnings about what other brands have tried to do. And there's been a lot of money spent in the basketball industry with the main goal of stealing loads of market share that has not worked at all, and is frankly in some cases completely backfired. So how are we, like, as Yuron said before, like we're not in this to be the biggest. We want to be the best, right? So like, what is the thing that we are going to carve out a position of strength in this world, and how are we going to build on it steadily, right? So like the independent thing is so important to us. And that comes through in the athletes that we partner with and the decisions that we make. We're coming from a place of incredible strength with amazing product. And if we can continue to tell that story of who we are and how we are operating differently, giving off those signals to existing and then hopefully loads of new consumers and customers, build it that way, build it strategically over time, instead of assuming that you're going to come out of the gate and take over an entire mega basketball industry that's been really like hitting on all cylinders for 30 plus years, right? How are we going to do this in a smart, strategic, thoughtful, and aggressive when we need to be way?
Understood. You're what do you see as being a challenger brand? Like what's been key to kind of be able to break through?
Yeah, Patrick hits a lot of those, nails right on the head. But like to me, I kind of start off with the notion of fearless, right? I think challenger equals fearlessness, right? And so if you go about it in that way, right? And a lot of us have been on some sort of field of play where the team may have been bigger, stronger, faster, but you still came out ahead at the end of the game, right? And I think our organization is built off of a notion of grit and fearlessness, right? And being confident and consistent in your messaging, in your purpose, in your vision, and not allowing yourself to outmarket yourself, right? The authenticity of being who you are allows you to become more and more fearless. And like if we're going to fail, we're going to fail spectacularly because we're driven towards a singular mission, and everyone is aligned to that. And so it just makes it a lot of fun, in a lot of cases. Like I've never been in a conversation with Patrick and had a conversation around revenue or dollars. The expectation is that those things are going to come if we're doing the right thing. And so whether that's conversation with Kawhi or Jaden Smith or Joe Freshgoods, we don't get into bottom line, top line conversation. we get into authenticity and storytelling as our purpose for whether it's sustainability, whether it's for the culture. You know, we just launched a shoe outside at a park in Chicago. You know, like brands aren't doing that sort of thing, right? But it was authentic to Joe Freshgood's mindset, and it was right for us as a brand as it relates to disruption and experiences.
So, I mean, that's a good segue, which is, you know, when is being a challenger an advantage, right? So it sounds like, you talked about being fearless and things like that. It is, but can you take other chances? I mean, you mentioned, you know, social ventures. You know, it is being that independent challenger brand. We could maybe take some risks. You know, tell me where it could actually be to your advantage.
I think it gives us the green light to go do all sorts of things that might feel uncomfortable, and that's okay, right? And we all hold hands in that. I mean, I think a great example of that is going back to the Kawhi thing. When we first when he came into our lives, he was a guy who was in transition between San Antonio and Toronto, two places not looked at as gigantic mega markets on the level of like a LA or New York. He had some issues, or how his time in San Antonio ended, and here he was, and we were going through the process with him to figure out if this is what this was the guy to go with, because he had given off a bunch of those signals of like independent mindset. There's arguably no other unique, independently minded athlete in all of basketball for sure.
Right.
But at the same time, it was like, I don't know how many times people asked us, how can you sign a guy that doesn't even have social media channels? Why would you even he never talks to the press. Why would you do this? And it was like, it's exactly the reason why we do this, because he's not like everybody else, right? And we can work with him to get into who he is, who he wants to be, the story he wants to tell, and do it together with New Balance, with the most independent thinking athlete in arguably all of professional sports.
Yeah, I mean, that certainly makes sense, and it seems like Kawhi Leonard was a great choice, and obviously that relationship to athletes in building a sports brand is obviously extremely important. And you know, how do you select? I mean, obviously that you talked about Kawhi Leonard, that certainly is logical. But generally, talk me through the process. Like, how do you find that, like, the right athlete for your brand? Like, what's that process like?
Do you want me to fill this one to start?
Oh, go ahead, jump into it, because you know I love your perspective. Go get it.
So we're talking about the fearless independent mindset and consumer mindset. It's the same thing. Who are the athletes who are signaling to us that same type of thought and behavior and actions? So Kawhi was actually our second basketball player that we partnered with. First was a young guy named Darius Baisley, who was originally supposed to go to Syracuse, and he decommitted, and he then flirted with the G League. And we didn't know him, but we were seeing his quotes in the newspapers about how he wants to be a pioneer and be a trailblazer and not follow this blueprint where you're supposed to go to play in a certain AAU program, you're supposed to go to one of these universities, you stay for X number of years, and you go to the NBA and you sign with the same brands over and over again. He did not want to do that. So we went and talked to him like we would do with any of the athletes, like we do with Kawhi Leonard, like we've done with any of our track athletes or face of brand, face of sport, baseball athletes, football athletes, to really get into it of here's who we think you are. Here are the signs that we're seeing from you. Here is what we're about. Do you want to do this with us? And it's trying to find those athletes who are have that independent mindset, or not really fazed by what the crowd is doing, or where their peers are going, or what they're doing. Somebody who wants to be engaged in marketing, somebody who wants a partnership versus a sponsorship. There are plenty of athletes who just they want to get paid to wear a product, and that's it. And that's totally fine. That has worked for athletes for a very long time, and that's great. We do not want to do that. We want athletes who are in it with us, who want to be not only performance marketing, but can be beacons for lifestyle. who want to be engaged with brand campaigns, who take giving back to their community incredibly seriously. Like there is a provision in every one of our athlete contracts for charitable give back that is not represented in other, I would say, in other competitors' deals with athletes. And then just above all, like we want athletes who are seeking opportunities to be one of one or one of a few versus one of hundreds, and for what that means to their relationship with their footwear brand that hopefully not only goes the length of their performance contract, but well after they're done competing. So when you start to apply those filters to potential athletes and doing the investigation and talking to athletes one-on-one, the circle of who matches a lot of that criteria gets pretty small pretty fast.
Right.
And that's okay, because we're in this for the long haul with anyone we bring on. So we're talking in world of basketball, we're never going to have 200 NBA players, right? We're going to have a handful of the right athletes that we want to partner with, and that's reflected in all of our other lanes of business, all of our other categories. And it's a pretty strenuous process, and we are in a wonderful position now because of the brand momentum of where we're going, where we get to say no a hell of a lot more than we say yes, and that's been a great spot to be in.
Wow. Yeah, that is great. And it's, I mean, it brings actually to the next question is then, how you compete, right? Because you did say there's some very large brands that, presumably offer more money. And so, maybe Yuron, will start with you. Like, how do you convince, maybe Kawhi Leonard makes sense, right? But how do you convince the next athlete that you find that you think is a really representative of your brand to, leave one of the other larger players and come to New Balance?
Yeah, and like for me, and again, I think Patrick may have answered a little bit of this, but like since being here in the brand, like I've had to say no much more than I've had to say yes. And I think when you're doing things right and you're coming from a place of authenticity, you don't have to like go out and sell. Like I've never had a conversation with an athlete where we were putting on a sale job, right? I've talked to more athletes, fathers and brothers and mothers. And if we don't have a feeling of family, right? And can we have a relationship with this person and the team around them, then that's already an identifiable mark of a no right away. Because it truly is not just about, like New Balance has a lot of money and we can throw a lot of money at things. We're not trying to buy our way into a business. We are looking for authentication, right? And so to me, that's where it all kind of stems from. And anytime that I'm sitting in a meeting with Patrick and we're having conversations about or with athletes, it all comes from a place of honesty, right? No question. Like we want to make sure most of our meetings last for half an hour to an hour. They run for 2.5 hours because we're just having conversation like we're sitting at a dinner table, right? And that's the special sauce that New Balance has that I have not seen from others within the industry. And players call back and back, agents call back and back because they're like, we want to be a part of that.
Excellent. And so, but then how do you measure if that relationship's working for the brand? Right. So it's because obviously you will spend money, clearly.
Yeah.
And then it has to have an impact on the brand. So what are the things you're going to look at? And then even report back, because obviously you're nurturing a relationship with the athlete too. So you have to sort of prove to the athlete, hey, this has been a fruitful relationship for your brand. And then you discuss internally, especially a contract renewals coming up. Like, how do you measure whether or not, hey, this relationship has been, we're getting a positive ROI on it?
Yeah, I think as you look back and, you could use a number of those athletes that Patrick talked about, or, 20, 30 others that he didn't speak about. But I think the KPIs become relatively evident with, like Kawhi, a little bit of an anomaly, right? Championships, all-star MVPs, consumer impressions, business has, not only doubled, but tripled. We see all of those things as, you know what, we made the right decision. but the work in progress does not just lend itself to, okay, let's stop and look at the revenue numbers and see where we're at. That comes along with the journey of doing the right thing, and ultimately, like, there is no bad decision once we have a handshake. It's a long-term opportunity and venture with someone, and so we don't have to go, every 4 weeks and do a check-in to see like how Foot Locker's business is doing with this particular athlete, or how our tier 0 accounts are doing with this particular influencer. We know if we stick to our plan and the blueprint of which we've dialed up for success, that once we get to those KPIs and measurements, we can trust ourselves and our judgment, and the top and the bottom line as well.
I know we're coming at time. So the last question I had really was, where do you see the New Balance brand in 10 years from now? Anybody else? Patrick, you want to kick off?
Basketball or the overall brand, or both?
I'd say the overall brand, right? Maybe basketball's a catalyst, but where do you see that leading to?
So I see it as the next steps in the journey that we've been on, and fully achieving that. So New Balance is a 115-year-old brand. For the longest time, the goal was to be the #1 running brand in the world, and that now sits alongside of being the top global sports brand that's connected, in so many cultural ways, and they're connected in many ways. Those two goals. I see the continued realization of those steps. We will have a growing but controlled, tight array of killer, independent acting athletes that are incredible beacons for the brand, both on court, on field, on track, on pitch, as well as off. And that New Balance family will grow in the right way as we really continue to extend and push this momentum to achieve those lofty, but if we stay on the right track, attainable goals that we are living every day.
Excellent. I know, Ryan, we're probably at time. Should we jump in, or should we continue?
No, I think what we can do is we can close it out here. Gentlemen, I would love to say two things. First and foremost, what an amazing conversation. Thank you all for taking the time to be here. I love what you're doing. I love this conversation to the New Balance gents. Love that we were talking about how you're just going beyond basketball. You're looking to really take that to the next level.